When I train, if you guys know me, I always have a PowerPoint. Otherwise, I am way over here. So it just keeps me on track. So don't feel like the PowerPoint is making this, very rigid. It is not. We want to have a conversation. Please ask questions. Please share tips or, things that you have. And we would love to have this be a wonderful conversation. And that's really what we're trying to do. We want to give people the tools to have conversations with children in their lives. We don't want this to feel complicated. We don't want this to, feel so difficult. We want to make it so you can have conversations with and even adults, right? So, that'll be part of our conversation today is how do you tell other adults that you're teaching your children that their body is their own, right? So sometimes it's those conversations with adults as well. So for those of you that are familiar or unfamiliar with Corner House, here is our cute little house on the corner of 10th and 25th in Minneapolis, right next to Children's Hospital. I always kind of joke about this. For those of you that have seen the movie Up, I really think someone from Disney drove by our house and that was the inspiration for that house. And the reason I think that is I love little lapel pins. And so I was looking for a lapel pin of a house and everything that popped up in my Google was a lapel pin from the movie Up. And it looked almost exactly like our house. And then it had all of these balloons. Yes, but that is our house. And for those of you that are familiar with Corner House, you know that we opened in 1989. So we are so looking forward to next year because it is going to be our 35th anniversary. And for nonprofits, that's a really big deal. So we're getting ready to do some celebrating. But also we opened in 1989, which means this house is a little bit like the little old lady who lived in a shoe. Not all of us fit in there. So we are currently kind of looking for some extended space for all of us to fit. But here's what we're going to talk about today, family conversations, right? So just as this is a conversation, this is going to be talking to my child about body safety. And as you know, it's termed consent and it's across the ages, right? So we want this to be a conversation that continues as your child is growing. So rest assured, I can tell you that at Corner House, when we are talking about teaching consent to a 4-year-old, we are not talking about full-in sex education, right? So just as math grows with your child, right, they start to count to 3 and then they count to 10 and then they start to count their teddy bears and then they add and then they subtract and then they multiply. And then the next thing you know, they're learning calculus. This is the same thing with consent, right? We want that conversation to grow with your child. So we're not expecting 4-year-olds to know calculus, but we do want our kids in high school and college to be educated, right? So that's kind of the analogy that I'm using when we talk about consent. So the key points that we're going to talk about today is one, just having family rules, right? And whether you want to call them, our Straub family rules, our safety rules for our family, whatever you want to call it. But we want you to sit down with your family and talk about what's important for your family. What are the guidelines and the rules and the expectations? And it's not only to be kind of a punitive thing for kids, right? To be like, oh, you broke our family rule, but it really is prevention. We want to prevent things from happening, right? So for those of you, I don't know if anybody had to drive yesterday, but here's the thing with prevention. No one thinks it's going to be us sitting in the ditch and getting on the news, right? So when it's like, oh, the roads are ice covered, who's that dumb driver that ended up in the ditch, right? No matter what the topic is, as humans, right, we just think, oh, I understand that happens, but I don't think it would ever happen to me. So prevention is let's not have these things happen to us, right? So let's have conversations so we can put our children in the best possible circumstance. And then we know places like Corner House are around. We're not in a situation where we have been able to prevent all bad things happening to kids. That's why we're here, and that's why many of you on this call are here. But we do have the opportunity, and it's educating, and it's conversation, and it is not fear-based. We don't want to scare our kids, right? So there is nothing that you will ever learn from Corner House where we're going to try to scare kids. We're not going to trick kids. I don't know if any of you have seen some of the videos where, you know, the parents leave and they put hidden cameras in, and then they have someone knock on the door, right? Tricking our children, we don't learn that way, right? Kids don't learn that way. We want this to be conversations. And as parents, it's okay to say, you know what, I'm not sure. I'm going to have to think about that. Or, you know what, I actually don't know the answer. So I'm going to go and I'm going to talk to some people who maybe know more than I do. And I'm going to get back to you. Right. So I can tell you that. And the other thing, no parent has ever died from having to take a breath before they answer their child. Right. So some of these things, we just want this to feel very, very natural. But knowing that some things are harder to talk about than others. Today we're going to talk, what is consent? What does that mean? We're going to talk about body parts. We're going to talk about what is body autonomy versus compliance. And then we're going to talk about how do we set up boundaries, and how do we teach our children to recognize boundary violations. So those are the 5 key points that we hope everyone will take away from today. So family rules. We want this to be, kids are always afraid that they're going to have the sex talk, right? And it's going to be very uncomfortable, and it's going to be a lecture. We want you to have conversations with your children ongoing. And we want you to talk about all types of things. And maybe you're going to have an agenda. Maybe you're going to say, you know what? The school year is starting, so we're going to have a family meal. We're going to talk about safety tonight, and we're going to talk about new curfews. We're going to talk about the route that you take from the bus. We're going to talk about what happens if you get home and mom or dad aren't here, right? We want to set it up. We want the kids to know. We also want to say, you know what, if something's going on in your life, nothing is off limits. Right? We're going to have something that we're planning on talking about. But if there's something going on, we want you to talk about it, right? Kids have a lot of knowledge. And when we talk about, you know, how we interview kids at Corner House, we talk about children are the experts in their own experience. That's what we want you to invite your children to have as well. Part of the family. We don't want it to be where we're, you know, talking. We want to invite the kids. What do you think? What do you see at school? What are you noticing? You know, what do you think would be fair? What do you, right? Knowing that it's not always a democracy when it comes to family rules, but we want to set the stage so children know, no matter what is going on in my life, no matter how old I am, I can always talk to somebody about it. We never want a child, no matter how old they are, to feel like they have a problem that is unsolvable. And that's why we want these conversations to continue. So have fun, make it fun, have fun foods, have snacks, right? Put the phones away until you're talking about technology, then bring them out, right? But just have this so it's an open conversation, and have them a couple times a year or quarterly or whatever. So it's not that children have to save up things that they want to talk about. So decide what your rules are, decide the guidelines, decide what you think is important for your family. and pick some topics and put them on the calendar and make sure everybody knows that we're going to have these family talks and we're going to talk about things. And anything we talk about is absolutely okay. So what is consent? And consent has lots of different meanings, and it's not always tied to sexual activity. That's why we start talking to children as young as 3 and 4 about consent. It's permission. It's about the word yes. It's, do you have a green light? Are you okay with it? Are you making sure that you're asking, right? These are all the things that we're talking about when we talk about consent. And again, this definition will grow with the age of your child. So if you just go on, if you have a Word document and you use your thesaurus, and you put in consent, these are the words that you're going to get, right? Permission, agreement, acknowledgement, approval, recognition, considerate, okay, evaluating, right? So you could see how these absolutely can connect to sexual activity, but they don't necessarily have to. The other thing is the opposite of consent is when you feel pressure to do something, when somebody's threatening you in a way, when you're feeling intimidated, when you're doing something out of guilt, when you're feeling like you don't have control over what's going on in your life, when someone is preventing you from doing something that you would like to do or you want to do, someone's blocking you, or someone is just ignoring your wishes or things that you need. Right? These are the things that we want kids to start recognizing. These are the things we want adults to be recognizing. Is somebody maybe doing these things in our lives or in the lives of our children? So when we talk about consent across the ages, what does it look like? If you have young children, let's say maybe second grade and below, but really kind of this preschool age, we start teaching consent with things like this. Children, you know what? If you want to play with Johnny, ask him if you can play with him. Johnny, can I play with you? Can I have a turn on the swing? Is that okay if I play with the fire truck now? That is all ways that we teach this idea of permission, right? It's not okay to just do something to another person if you don't have their permission, right? Be gentle with Tipper. So Tipper is my cat. I don't know if he'll make an appearance today, right? But for those of you that have pets and young children, that's talking about how we treat animals, how we treat other people. And maybe it's not Tipper, maybe it's a brother or sister. You know what? When we play with Tipper, Tipper doesn't like to have his tail pulled. We have to make sure that we're gentle with Tipper. Can you see how Tipper is purring when you pet him nicely? That's how he likes to have it, right? And it's just setting up this idea of how we treat other people. Can I have a hug or a high five? This idea of forced affection, and this will be a continuing conversation as we're going through today, but we want to teach children when they're very young that they have the right to say no to touches, right? That they get to say, can I have a hug? Can I hug you? If they're going to visit grandma, that we can give them the options of, you know what, when we're going to visit grandma, here are the choices. You can give grandma these choices. Grandma, would you like a hug? Would you like a high five? Or would you like a handshake? Right? But we want to have that conversation with that child to make sure that they're okay with all of those behaviors. And that's a little bit of that body autonomy that we'll talk about in a little bit. When kids are young, we want to right away let them know that they are ownerships of their body. So school age children, right? This is maybe, we're talking about elementary, talking about middle school. There tends to be a kind of a, and maybe more with boys and girls, but kind of some rough play, some wrestling. Not all children feel comfortable with that. And when we hear a child saying no or stop, we want to make sure that our kids are listening to that. Those words have meaning. If I say no, I need you to understand it's no. If I say stop, I need you to understand it's stop. If I say give me a minute, I need you to understand I need a minute, right? So this idea of we don't want kids to ignore that. We also don't want to teach kids that those words don't mean anything. We want to teach kids that if they say no, it means no. And that may be the conversations that we have at the family table with siblings, right? Not everybody likes to play that way. And it's not always, here's the other thing, it's not always equal, right? Sometimes there's a kid who's bigger or stronger, and that doesn't feel good to the kid who isn't as big or just doesn't want to play that way. Sometimes rumors and gossip kind of start during this time, and that's a wonderful time. Maybe you have, you hear your kids saying, well, I don't want to invite so-and-so to my birthday party because, you know, something happened. So having that conversation, right? Or you hear somebody say, we're not gonna let Jane play because Jane is friends with Elizabeth. Right. So we're going to have that conversation and talk about how we talk about other people, right? How what we say about other people, that's a big deal, right? We just as we don't want people saying things about us, we don't want our kids to be learning that behavior and talking about other kids. And then we have, you know, kind of bullying, harassment, peer pressure, right? And all of that is the idea with consent is every human and really every living thing on the planet should be respected, right? And even if everybody else is doing it, it doesn't mean that that's okay for you to say something mean or for you to join in, right? So having those conversations, right? And this idea of humans, we treat other humans with respect. And here's the thing, even if I don't agree with you, I don't have the right to say something mean to you or the right to hurt you. And that again, it goes both ways, right? Because we want to teach our children that they have the right to say something different, to have a different opinion, to have a different view than everyone else, and not think that they have to hide it or that there's something wrong or that somebody would potentially hurt them. And then the other way is they also have to allow someone else to have an opinion or have someone else disagree with them without it becoming disrespectful. So you can see how consent really can really broaden out to things not even related to sexual contact. And then we have adolescence, right? And adolescence, and maybe even with some of the school age, a wonderful kind of initiation to talking about consent is actually talking about technology, right? Because here's what happens. You have to consent to every single app that you download. You have to consent to everything that you put on your computer. And what happens is, for the most part, we just click yes. And we don't understand that when we're giving consent to downloading that, we're actually giving away some of our privacy, right? So again, that doesn't have anything to do with sex, right? But if you hit yes to download that app, what are they able to know about you? And again, that's a wonderful conversation to have on family, you know, family safety night when we're talking about technology, right? But all of these things. And also, when you post a picture of someone else, you really need to ask to make sure that you have permission to post, to tag, to share an image or information about someone else, and that you have the right to give permission to somebody else, right? And so just kind of starting with those conversations. Most kids, they have a phone or they have a computer, so they understand, and they've probably even seen that language. click yes to consent, right? So start that conversation. And then we know as children get older and maybe they start to date, they start to be interested in other people, they start to flirt. Consent may be related to touch, and it may be related to sexual touch. And we want that conversation to grow with our kids. No one has the right to touch you in a way that you don't like, and that includes sexual touch. You don't have the right to touch anybody else, including sexual touch, unless you have permission to do so. How do you know that you have that person's consent? This needs to be a conversation, right? When I'm in talking to, older kids, high school, young adults, this idea of assumed consent. I never want someone to guess or assume that they have another person's consent, right? This needs to be a conversation. These are things that we really need to talk about, right? And then we have things that really turn into guilt or coercion, right? You would if you loved me, right? That's not a healthy relationship tenet. That's not a characteristic of a healthy relationship. And again, we need to be having these conversations with their kids as they're growing, right? It's okay to say no. What happens if you say no, right? If someone gets mad at you because you say no, let's talk about that, right? That again, and we even see this as adults where, oh, I felt like I couldn't say no. I felt like I was pressured into doing it. It was just easier to say yes than to explain why I didn't want to do it, right? And as we're doing those, we're role modeling that for kids, and we want our kids to be able to say no if they're feeling uncomfortable. So this actually comes from our Minnesota statute on consent. And you can see, even as you read it, doesn't necessarily mean it's related to sexual content, although it is because it's our state statute. But looking at consent means permission. I agree to this behavior or action with you. Both people are saying, absolutely, right? This is my choice. This is what I want to do. And we're not assuming. Permission that is clearly spoken and freely given. So even that 4 or 5-year-old, did you ask if you could play with the toy? What did Elizabeth say when you asked if you could have a turn with the toy? Right? So we can see even from the very beginning, we're teaching that idea of permission, doing something to someone, doing something with someone, right? All of these things start with a conversation when children are very young, and they can just start to grow into it. So what does consent look like in real life, right? It's about communication, and it needs to happen every time. Just because Elizabeth let you play with the fire truck yesterday doesn't mean she's going to let you play with the fire truck today, right? Every time we're going to ask. If I'm asking my child if I can hug them, I'm going to ask them every time, right? Is it okay if I have a hug, right? Is it okay if I have a hug, right? Is it okay? And if my child says, no, I don't feel like giving a hug today, then I'm going to say, okay, how about a high five? How about a handshake, right? So this idea of it needs to be consistent, and it needs to be happening all the time. I can change my mind, right? If all of a sudden I decided, you know what, actually, I don't want to do this. I've changed my mind. I have the right to do that. And I will say, from my experience doing education in high schools, there have been a lot of things that have surprised me. And one was I was talking to kids in high school about this idea of consent, and that you can withdraw it at any time. You can change your mind. You can say yes, and then all of a sudden say, you know what, actually, I think I want to stop. And I actually had in multiple classes, students that said, I didn't know that you could change your mind, right? It is imperative that we're having these conversations. I also had another student say, well, Mrs. Straub, I heard it wasn't rape until the person said no 3 times, right? So this is why, again, it's so important to have these conversations. I don't want children to think that they don't have rights to say no. I don't want adolescents to feel like they don't get ownership of their body. I also don't want any child, any adolescent, or any adult to think that they don't have to have permission from someone else, right? So these, again, they're so important, they're conversations, but hopefully you can see how they grow with the child. And consent is not about the word no, it's actually about the word yes. Did Elizabeth say that you could play with her fire truck? Yes, she said I could play with it for 5 minutes. Okay, great. Right. How do you know that Jane wanted you to kiss her? How do you know? Did Jane say that you could post her picture on Facebook? Did Jane say that you could post the picture on TikTok? Right. These are the conversations that we want to have. It's not just about me and my permission. It's about what am I doing against the permission, against the will, against the consent of somebody else, right? And then we know consent, especially when we're talking about sexual activity, consent is negated. If there is drug use, if someone is under the influence of alcohol, if there is any fear, any threats or coercion, that takes consent off the table, right? And that too is this conversation as we're sending kids off to college. We know, unfortunately, alcohol is it's a huge issue on campus. We know that sexual assaults tend to be linked to alcohol use, right? And it's this idea we need to teach, just because somebody's drunk doesn't mean that it's okay. If somebody's passed out, that's an absolute no, right? These are just conversations. Sometimes we think, oh, well, my child would never do that. My child would never be in that situation, right? And I remember when I was sending my daughter to school, and of course, my daughter grew up with me as her mother, right? So she had a lot of these conversations growing up. But I remember in her dorm when I was dropping her off, and there was kind of like this, it was 4 rooms that were kind of all together. And I just remember having this conversation, like, if you guys go to parties, right, and there's drinking, you guys have to be careful. And I said, I don't care if it's somebody that you don't know, but if you're at a party and there is a male or a female and they are passed out on the couch, do something about it, right? It's like no person left behind, right? It is, even if it's not you, even if it's someone you don't know, but this idea of preventing potential bad things from happening and having those conversations. Because again, we never want to be in a situation where we're just thinking, oh, that would never happen. I don't have to have this conversation because my child knows better. They would never be in that situation, right? The other thing I kind of want to ask, and you guys don't have to reply, but how many of you remember maybe a time when you were a child and you had a situation where an adult did something or said something to you and it made you feel really uncomfortable, but you didn't know you could do anything about it, right? And maybe it was something that even made you feel embarrassed or made you feel ashamed, and it just sat, right? Because no one ever talked to you about it, right? Or maybe as parents, you have the situation where somebody did something or said something to your child and you didn't know how to react to it, right? So that's part of the reason why I want you to have these conversations. And here's the deal. We don't always react the way that we should. Kids don't always react the way that they should. So even if we have these conversations, we're teaching our kids about saying no. We're teaching our kids about telling and reporting. And then something happens and they don't tell us. we want to send the message, even if you didn't say no, even if you didn't tell me right away, it is okay. It is never too late to tell me something that's important, right? So these, again, conversations. And again, it doesn't mean that it's child abuse. It doesn't mean that it's sexual assault, right? I don't care what it is, right? But just these situations where sometimes children don't know how to react, and that's okay. And even if we practiced and they didn't get it right, that's okay. Let's talk about it. Let's have this. So some of you have maybe seen the consent video that has to do with tea, and that's a really great video. This is another one. It's about ping pong. So again, this is not a video. This is not for our preschool kids. This is not for our elementary kids. But this is for our kids when they're starting to, maybe be interested in somebody else, when we want them to have education about healthy sexuality, about what's consent, when we're sending them off to college, when they're young adults. So this is just a video, and again, it's very similar to the tea video, but it's ping pong. All right. So another thing is this idea of body safety, and this idea of we want children to know the anatomically and medically correct names for all of their body parts. So I think there's something about our culture, society, where we feel uncomfortable, right? Or if I tell my 3-year-old that she has a vagina, then all of a sudden I have to have the sex talk. Right. And again, this is something that's going to grow with your children, but all of your body parts are part of you. And there is not one of your body parts that you should be ashamed of. Right. So if I call this an eye and I call this a nose and I call this an elbow, I'm going to call these breasts, or I'm going to call this a vagina, right? Or it's going to be a penis, or, right? All of these things. We never want children to think that some of our body parts, that they're not okay to talk about. The other thing that happens with that is we say, yep, you have all of these body parts. All of these are part of your body. But we do have some of our body parts that have special rules to them. And sometimes we call maybe our breasts or vagina or penis or butt or anus, those are parts that we call private parts. And they're called private because those are the parts that we typically are under a swimsuit, or they're under our clothes. Our private parts are private because it's not okay for other people to touch or see those private parts. And I want you to know, if anybody is ever asking to see your vagina or to see your penis or touch your penis, I want you to tell me about that, right? So these, again, we're just having these conversations. Now, here's what I'm going to tell you. Kids are curious about their bodies, right? So as they grow, They are very curious. They want to know, and they should have a right to know because they're parts of their body, right? All of them are parts. Some of our parts have different rules to them, but it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with those body parts. It just means that they have special rules. Now, sometimes you may go to the doctor, and the doctor may want to make sure that your body is healthy. So the doctor may look at all of your body parts, but that would never be a secret, right? So sometimes when we talk about touching, we bring in this idea of that touching would never be a secret, right? If somebody gives you a hug, that touch would never be a secret. Or someone wouldn't say, don't tell your mom or dad about that. That's something we want kids to recognize too, and to say, you know what, in our family, one of our family rules is that we don't keep secrets about touches, right? If I get a hug, that I don't keep that as a secret. That's something that I talk to my mom or dad or my caregivers about. If someone asks to see one of my private parts, I talk to my mom or dad about that, right? Absolutely. These are the things that we want kids to understand. We want kids to know, because what happens is our kids get older. And I just found this picture today, right? Kids get older, and even when they start to be young kids, let's say elementary school, they still have the right to know about their bodies. And we know, unfortunately, puberty is starting earlier and earlier. We don't want kids to be like, what's going on with my body? Or I think there's something wrong with my body. We want to say, you know what, if you ever have questions about your body and your body parts, or questions about any body parts, I want you to know you can come and talk to me about it. And if I don't have the answer, I'll make sure that I find it, right? We want to take this idea of shame or secrecy away from body parts. Because here's the other thing that I will tell you, kids are very curious. They're curious, yet they're avoidant, which means they want to know, but they don't want to ask you about it. And we have this wonderful thing called Google. So I like to call this the 3 Bs. This is something that kids, when they start to be maybe 3rd grade and up, kids are really curious about boobs, balls, and butts. They just are, right? It's something that happens, right? And I will tell you that your kid can go to the computer and they can type in boobs, balls, or butts. And they're going to get a whole lot of information, and it may not be the information we want them to get, right? I would love if a child put boobs, balls, or butts. I would love that it went to WebMD or maybe the Mayo Clinic. That doesn't happen. And unfortunately, we know that our children are exposed to far more than we were ever exposed to when we were growing up. Now, I may not, and a lot of times it's accidental, right? Here's the other thing. We know that there's, something with Google that no matter what you type in, if I typed in coffee cup, eventually I would get to a porn site, right? And if I type in boobs, balls, or butts, it doesn't take too many clicks to get to something that I don't want my child to be seeing. Here's the conversation we have. If you have any questions about your body, you can come to me. You know what? I know that sometimes you're online, and sometimes maybe you click on something, and maybe you click on something that has to do with body parts. I want you to know that if that happens, I'm not mad and it's not your fault. There's a lot of things on Google, and if you see something and you have questions, I want you to know you can come to me. The last thing we want is our kids to keep secrets from us, right? Or to see something or hear something or have someone say something to them or do something to them, and they feel like they can't come to us. So we're going to open it up. You know what? Sometimes I click on something and it's not what I think it was going to be. And sometimes I click on something maybe that I don't want to see. And I just want you to know, if that ever happens to you, you can come and talk to me about it. As kids get older, we want to expand the amount of people that they can talk to, right? Because maybe they don't feel comfortable talking to you. So who are other adults that we can let them know they can talk to, right? You can talk to your aunt, you can talk to your uncle. Is there a teacher that you can talk to? Maybe you can talk to your health teacher, right? But if you or someone you know is ever in a situation where you need help or something's going on, who are the people that you can talk to? Again, it doesn't have to necessarily be sexual content online, right? But just this idea of, again, we never want children to feel like they have problems that are so big that they're unsolvable. And sometimes it starts when our kids are maybe in 3rd grade and maybe 6th grade, and they get a cell phone or they're on the computer. And I know there are some parents that will say, oh, well, I have, at our house, our IT is locked down. You can never fully, like, boobs, balls, and butts. I'm not going to tell you to do it, because you will get porn, even if you think your technology is locked down, right? It's just the world that we live in. If you give your child access to the internet, you have now given the internet access to your child. That's just what it is. So let's have conversations about it, right? Let's talk about it. Let's say, hey, mistakes are going to happen. Things are going to happen. You may see something. You know what? If you're ever on a site, and it could be an educational site, it could be a gaming site, whatever. If you're ever on a site and somebody asks you for personal information, or they ask something about your body part, I want you to come and talk to me about it, right? We don't want it to be where that happens to our child and then they didn't know what to do. And then maybe they did something and then now they feel like they have to keep it a secret. So these are the conversations that we're going to have as kids get older. We talk about touches. We know the name of our private parts, right? We also will teach kids, you know what? Sometimes other parents may teach their kids other names for body parts, but I just want you to know that if you hear the word, boobies or boobs, that's the same as breasts. In our house, we call them breasts. Sometimes people use different names for vagina. If somebody's talking about something that's a vagina and they're using a different name, I just want you to know that in our family, our word for that body part is vagina. Our word is penis. You may hear other words, right? So having that conversation again as children are growing up. You know what? If you're ever in a situation and somebody is asking to see your penis, you can say no, right? And let me know about it. If someone's asking to take a picture, if someone's asking when you're online. And then again, when our kids get older, you know what? If you're in a relationship with someone or you like someone at school and they say, you know what? I like you, so I need you to send me a picture of a body part. That's not part of a healthy relationship. And you have the right to say no. People who respect each other, people who want to be in a relationship with each other, they don't ask people to do things that they don't want to do. You do not have to send a picture of body parts, right? So again, having these conversations, because this turns into, we know, unfortunately, our youth are at risk for online exploitation. So let's have this conversation ahead of time. And again, that doesn't mean that we can prevent all potential bad things from happening, but it is more likely, if I have initiated these conversations with kids, that they know that it's not okay, or they also know, shoot, I think I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I think I did something really dumb, but you know what? I can still talk to my mom or dad about it, right? That's how we give children control. And that's what we want to do. We want to empower children. We want to say, it's okay to say no to touches because you own your body, right? I would like you to hug grandma. I'm not going to make you hug grandma. So what's something that you can do instead? If you don't feel like hugging grandma today, what's something else you can do? Would you be willing to give grandma a high five? Would you be willing to give grandma a handshake? Would you be willing to give grandma a fist bump? Would you be willing to draw grandma a picture? Right? Because grandma loves you. And sometimes when people love people, they think that if I love you, that I can make you hug somebody. In our family, when we talk about family rules, we don't have that family rule. We don't force people that we love to hug us or to do things that we don't want to do. And sometimes we have to explain that to grandma too. So what are some things that we can do, right? And again, this conversation is going to grow with the kids. This idea of boundaries. So these are two books I would highly recommend. The original book from Gavin DeBecker is called The Gift of Fear. And it really is talking about that alarm system that goes off when we feel uncomfortable, right? So when we talk about that stress response system, when we talk about the fight, the flight, or the freeze component, a lot of times we don't get a choice. Our body kind of just makes that decision for us. But what happens when that alarm system goes off is sometimes we ignore it. And when the alarm system goes off, it doesn't necessarily mean, oh my gosh, something horrible is going to happen. But the body is sending a signal to you that says, let's at least check it out, right? Because something that this person said, or something this person did, or something about the situation that I am currently in is sending a signal to my body, and it's making me feel uncomfortable. And we want kids to recognize that. So the second book that Gavin DeBecker put out is called Protecting the Gift. And this is for adults, parents, caregivers to read, to have these conversations with their kids, right? What does your body feel like when you're nervous? What does your body feel like when you're scared? What does your body feel like when you think you're in trouble? What does your body feel like? And it's recognizing those signals. And that is really teaching about body boundaries, right? So this idea is my body is my body, your body is your body, right? You get to choose how you use your body. And I get to choose how I use my body. And I have the power to protect myself. You have the power to protect yourself. And sometimes that's just saying, no, I don't want to hug today, right? No, I don't want to do that today. No, I don't want to post a picture. No, I don't want to send a picture. No, I don't want you to post that video on TikTok today. No, I don't feel comfortable doing that. And giving children the words that they can use. We want to listen to our body, right? We want to understand what makes us feel uncomfortable. And sometimes, is it a certain person that's making us feel uncomfortable, right? And why is it when I'm with that person, I'm starting to feel uncomfortable? Why is it when I'm in a certain situation, I feel uncomfortable, right? So instead of just saying, oh, I think it's nothing, I'm probably overreacting, just say, I'm actually going to pay attention because my body's telling me something. Could be a false alarm, but I'm going to listen. And we want to teach kids, these are the adults that you can go to if you need help. These are the adults if you have questions. These are the adults if a friend needs something, right? These are the things. And you know what? One of our family rules, we don't keep secrets from each other. We may have surprises, right? The bike that we have hidden in the garage for Elizabeth's birthday, that's a surprise. It's not a secret. The cake that we're going to pick up at the bakery, That's a surprise. It's not a secret. We don't keep secrets in our family. Anything that has to do with body parts, anything that has to do with touches, anything that has to do with things that make us feel uncomfortable, we don't keep those as secrets in our family. And I want you to know that you can come and talk to me about anything. Here's one caveat that I say when I talk to parents. Please say, there is never anything that you can do or say that will stop me from loving you. There is never a problem so big that we can't work together to solve. Please do not promise your child that you will never be mad at them. Because here's the thing, sometimes we can't control our emotions. And even when we're scared or we're shocked, to a child, that may look like anger. And then what happens is your child says, you said you would never be mad, right? And then they start to think that they can't trust us. So here's the thing, and you can say, you know what? You may tell me something and I may have a reaction because I need to process it and think it. I need to think it through, right? So this idea of to promise that you will never be mad, sometimes we can't make, because initially I may be mad, or I may be scared, or I may be shocked. And to that child, I now have lied to them, right? So there is never anything you can do that will stop me from loving you. There is never a problem so big that we can't work it out, right? And you may agree to disagree, you may, right? But just for me, that's what I found to be helpful. These are some, we have a ton of new books that are out, right? Don't hug Doug. He doesn't like it. It's just not my thing. This is a board book for kids, right? So it's a wonderful opportunity. Miles is the boss of his body. This is another board book. So if you look up consent books for children, you're just going to find a whole bunch. And again, it's going to go through ages and stages of development. So you're going to find books that you can read with your child, you can read as a parent for all stages of development. This is a wonderful video of a teacher teaching the idea of consent. So you can see in that video, the children chose their mode of saying good morning to their teacher, right? Ben, he didn't want any physical touch, right? And there was another girl too, was just this, right? So this idea of we want children to be able to choose how they would like to be touched. And I love that video. I think it's just amazing. So these are things we want to teach our kids. Again, I talked about this. No, stop, or take a break. Those words have power and we listen to those words. If I'm saying those words, you need to listen. And if you're saying those words to me, I need to listen. You have the right to say yes or no to touch. And that includes family members, right? And again, there could be different reasons why a child may not want to hug. And again, maybe tomorrow I feel like giving you a hug, but right now I just don't. So I'm going to choose something else. I'm going to give you maybe a high five. I'm going to give you a thumbs up. I'm going to have another choice that I can say. Recognizing no, right? Just because a person doesn't say no, If somebody's turning away, we have a lot of, we talk with our body, right? So our body language, our facial expressions, that gives a lot of information. And we want to start teaching children to recognize body language and to recognize faces. We want to be listening for yes. What did Elizabeth say when you asked if you could play with her fire truck? She said, no, not right now. She said, maybe later. She said, yes, you can play with it for 5 minutes, right? We want to be talking about this. We want to hear that yes. It starts to teach this idea of empathy, right? I just don't get to do something to somebody else and they just don't get to do something to me. That has meaning behind it. And we know empathy is one of those, it's a developmental stage. It grows with children. It also needs to be cultivated and it needs to be practiced. And these are wonderful ways to increase empathy. We want to talk about feelings, right? So also this idea of when you took the fire truck from Elizabeth, that made her sad, right? When you posted that picture of your friend and she didn't want that, she's angry with you now, right? Can we understand why she would be mad about that, right? So these are the conversations. And I want my child to be able to verbalize the feelings that they have. I want them to recognize feelings that other children or other adults are having. No is a complete sentence, right? But we want to teach children, even if they're in a situation where they didn't say no, they didn't feel like they could say no, they were afraid to say no, it is still never their fault. So just a quick video.
No.
No way.
Come on, no.
No.
Only Discover has no.
So I saw that commercial. It was on the Super Bowl maybe 5 years ago. And I'm like, I'm downloading that for my consent training. So non-consensual words that mean no, right? If someone says no, it means no. If someone says, I don't know, that's not a yes, right? I'm not sure, stop, I'm scared, wait a minute. Or if someone doesn't answer you, that's not a yes, right? What did Elizabeth say when you asked her if you could play with her fire truck? She didn't say anything. Okay, if you didn't hear a yes, then Elizabeth didn't want you to play with her fire truck, right? So these are all of the things that we want to be teaching kids as they go. Yes, what is yes? Yes. And when we talk even about consent for sexual activity, there was a phrase that came about probably about 5 years ago, and it was coined enthusiastic consent. You are absolutely sure, right? And here's the thing. I hope that you would like to be having sex with someone who really wants to have sex with you. That's what it is, right? So somebody that doesn't really want to be doing something sexual with you, I hope you really don't want to be doing something sexual with them either, right? So this idea of how do you know? Oh my God, because what did they say?
Yes!
Yes?
Yes? Yeah, sure. Yes.
Yes. Yeah, no problem.
Yes.
Yes, 1,000 times yes.
Discover.
And what does yes sound like? Oh my gosh, don't stop. Oh my gosh, I love that. You know what? I want to do that. Oh, I like that. Oh, I'm excited. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm sure I want to do this. You know what? I want you to do this. And again, absolutely, you can use these phrases with sexual content, but does not have to be, right? This is what means yes, different ways of saying it, and we want our kids to recognize that. Boundaries are very important. We want to set up family boundaries. We want our children to set up boundaries. These were just some things that I pulled that I think have unintended results, and they can become teaching moments, right? So the first one is we want to teach children that their bodies are their own and they're allowed to say no. And that's really hard when you have family members that equate this with respect and compliance, right? So for some reason, if your child doesn't want to give me a hug, they're being disrespectful, right? I don't want to teach my children to be completely compliant. I want my child to have body autonomy. As an adult, I want to have body autonomy. I want people to know if you want to hug me or touch me, you have to have my permission to do so. And when we teach kids that, but then all of a sudden we go to family events and then we have people that get mad or think that our children are being rude, we need to have those conversations with adults, and we need to say things like, you know what, in our family, we're teaching our kids that we don't force physical contact. You know what, we're teaching Jane that she's allowed to make decisions about her own body. So thank you for respecting her and the decision that she's making, right? You know what? Jane is so happy to be here, but Jane doesn't feel like giving a hug today. So I'm going to give you a hug for both of us, right? And have those conversations. And if you need to have a private conversation with someone in your family, right? And just say, you know what? When I was growing up, I remember being in situations where I was forced to hug people and I didn't want to do it. And I don't want my child to feel that way. That sends a mixed message. And so we're teaching our children that they have the right to say no. And we don't force our children to give physical contact, right? Every time we ask our children to kiss or hug a relative when we don't want to, we unintentionally teach them that they have to do things to make other people happy, even if they don't want to, right? That could snowball down the line, right? That's not the message. That is unintended. I don't want my child to think that, right? When we respond because they're an adult and you're a child, that teaches children that they're powerless and that adults are always right, right? And again, in the work that we do at Corner House, when it gets to the point of abuse or exploitation, these are the things that offenders, they don't want us having these conversations with children. They don't want our kids to think that they have the right to say no. They don't want kids to tell adults if they feel uncomfortable, right? So sometimes everything for me is a competition. So I'm like, I'm gonna win, right? I'm gonna win this against the people that want our kids to keep secrets. Nope, no secrets, right? I'm gonna win in this world where people think, oh, you know, just because I'm an adult, I automatically get respect and I automatically get to do whatever I want, and that they're a child and they don't get to have say in it. Nope. Not in my family, not in our family rules, right? So, and some of these conversations may be tough, but it's so important that we have these. These are some things that undermine consent, right? These phrases, oh, boys will be boys, oh, be a good girl, right? No, right? That's not, boys, it's not just they're roughhousing because they're boys, so that's okay, we don't do anything about it. Nope, I don't care if you're a boy or a girl, right? No, right? If you're doing something to somebody else, regardless of gender, regardless of age, and they don't like it, we're gonna talk about it because we have a problem. Forced affection. I don't want to teach my children that they don't have a right, right? Contradicting their feelings. When a child may say, and these are things that we commonly do, right? Your child says, oh, I'm tired. And you say, how could you be tired? You just slept 12 hours. I'm hungry, right? Oh my gosh, how can you be hungry? You have been eating all day. I'm scared. Oh, there's nothing to be afraid of. I don't want to do it. Of course you want to do it. You know what? You're going to do it and you're going to love it, right? Tell me about being afraid. Tell me about being uncomfortable, right? We want to find out. Again, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something terrible happening. Why do you feel that way? Let's talk about it, right? it's because he likes you, right? And I think we're really moving away from this, that boys don't hit girls because they like them, right? Boys don't hit girls because they love them, right? This is something that we know, unfortunately, later turns into really unhealthy relationships. Now, nobody hurts another person because they love them or like them, right? If I like you, if I love you, I do things not to hurt you, right? Sex to please another person, right? Sex to solve problems, drugs and alcohol. Sex and love are not the same thing, right? So again, we can see how these conversations can grow, but we can see how they can be very, very dangerous. And then I'm going to end with another video that I just love. And it's this idea of, I don't want to guess, right? I don't want to assume that I have your permission. So this is called certain is better.
Can we even afford this house?
I'm pretty sure we can.
Pretty sure. With Rocket Mortgage, you can be certain, not pretty sure.
What's the difference?
Let me show you. I'm pretty sure these aren't poisonous. I'm pretty sure these are parachutes.
Mine has a sandwich.
That's mine. I'm pretty sure you do not run. I'm pretty sure you can take Batista down.
You're on.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is trending.
I'm pretty sure these hornets aren't the murdering type. I'm pretty sure we can make it.
Certain is better.
Let's go with certain.
Good choice.
When you're buying a home, pretty
These are just some additional videos. As I mentioned, there's the tea video. We watched the ping pong video. There's a consent for kids and lots of different books. So don't let this be the end of the conversation. We will continue conversations to have with kids. And so right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing. And we can go ahead, and if anybody has questions, comments, you can unmute yourself. You can turn your cameras on so I can see you. And if you want, I'm not going to make you turn your camera on.
Feel free
Questions?
to, you can put your questions in the chat. So if you're in a place where maybe you can't unmute, I will monitor that as well if you have any follow-up questions.
So you will see my teaching style contains humor. And I think for me, I know that doesn't work for everybody, but again, we never want to be scaring people. Scare education does not work. I can send the PowerPoint. I even stopped early, people. This hardly ever happens.
You did such a good job. Let's see, it looks like maybe Shauna's writing a question in the chat. So let's give it a few more minutes here.
And again, not right. I kind of planned 45 minutes, so not comprehensive, but hopefully there's just some good tools, some takeaways to get you guys started and other resources out there. And then we'd love to have you come back for additional conversation.
And while people are thinking of their questions, I'll let you know too that we encourage you to take our content and our training into your own worlds. So we are really trying to spread our wings as far as getting safety messages out there. So we are going, into communities and churches and schools and corporations with this messaging. So Jane talks on so many different topics. So if you have an organization or a community that you'd like to bring prevention to, please shoot us over an email. Our goal is to get in front of 10,000 people this year. with safety messaging and presentations. Let's see. Okay, this information is so helpful to promote and share with others. You have presented it in a way that feels comfortable and safe to share with children. So thanks for that message, Shauna.
Oh,
Let's
thanks,
see.
Shauna.
Jane says, what is the process if we want to have you provide this presentation? Oh, I lost the thing. Oh, if you want to provide this presentation to our group, yeah, I will send out a follow-up email. So if you do have a reason, you'd like us to bring this to your group, I'll send my email and you can just email me directly and we can go through what that looks like. I will say that this was a specialty topic, so that's why there was a price to it, but we do have just a general body safety safety message warning sign presentation that's just sort of a starting point into this topic. And we don't charge for that. So if you have an organization that could benefit and just wants to, start learning about these things, this is a really great opportunity. Right. Let's see. Someone said I would second that, especially with the stress that it doesn't just have to be consent about touch or sex. It can be about toys and sharing at school too. A great and neutral way for case managers to have these conversations without getting in trouble. And then Debbie asked, do you have materials that can be used in teaching consent to kiddos? I know you mentioned some books, but if there's anything else.
Yeah, Corner House has not produced any of our own materials as of yet. That is on our to-do list. So unfortunately, we kind of have to send you to other sources, but if you just Google consent for kids, don't click too many times because I don't want to get to a porn site, right? But you will find a ton of, there's a ton of great resources out there. And eventually we will have Corner House consent materials.
Yes, we're actually in the process right now of putting together prevention and safety kits for families that will include, actual cue cards that you can write your, safety plan on, and that will help guide you through safety planning nights with your families. So they'll have a bunch of resources in there. So soon they're coming. We'll have some really great training kits that we can distribute for family safety nights and prevention training. Okay. Last call for any questions?
I don't know what to do with myself. Got like extra 10 minutes.
Well, I can include too, Jane. I always include your email address in the follow-up email that goes out. So if you think of something or you need to reach out to Jane for any follow-up, or maybe just some one-on-one time with Jane to go over anything that was discussed, you'll have her contact information.
Yeah, and I will say this was kind of a small group, but it happens. Statistically, there may be somebody that's like, hey, can I talk about this situation I just had with my family over the holidays? Yes, you can. Or, yep. So absolutely. Process some things.
All right. Perfect. Well, we will just wrap up there then. Thanks for everyone who joined us, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day.
All right. Thanks, everybody.